In predominantly white neighborhoods across the country, parents are up in arms over something called critical race theory and what they believe is its sneaky inclusion into the public school curriculum.
We'll not have cancel culture. We will not have critical race theory.
In fact, during recent school board meetings in Randolph, Morris County, New Jersey, several residents went as far as to claim CRT amounts to child abuse. Given all the buzz, we decided it was time for a closer look at critical race theory. Britannica Encyclopedia states that critical race theory is based on the premise that race is a, quote, socially constructed category that is used to oppress and exploit people of color.
My understanding of critical race theory, it's pointing a finger outward, all around people who are affected by the history of race in the country, slavery, and not to be judgmental at all or begrudging of anybody, but the African American community in the country would be very well served to focus more inward.
Lissauer's position echoes what we've heard time and time again from critics of critical race theory. America's history does not warrant the need for an in-depth classroom examination of racism.
I'm not sure there is systemic racism in the United States. I mean,
oh, you question that?
I do question that. I don't think there is.
When you say is, you mean currently, or you question whether there ever was?
Let's say there was, historically, right? But even when there was, this country was founded, okay, on idealistic principles that we're all created equal.
I have a unique experience because I did grade school in New York City and also in Ohio.
Third-year law school student and Brooklyn native Joshua Davis says there was a staggering difference between what he learned in K through 12 about systemic racism and inequality in New York City public schools compared to his years spent in Ohio, adding back then, both experiences were far from perfect.
Did you learn about anything regarding systemic racism in K through 12?
Brown v. Board of Education. We learned about Ruby Bridges.
Did you learn anything about the negative impact of slavery through generations?
The negative impact? Absolutely not.
So there was no discussion about Juneteenth?
Absolutely not. I didn't even know about Juneteenth until I started to become an adult.
Contrary to what we heard from Michael Lissauer, Joshua Davis says black and white grade school students deserve an in-depth exposure to America's history, all of it.
And even to today with police brutality, if you do not learn about the injustices, the inequalities, the equitable issues that, people of color are going through in this country, well then you feel like you don't belong.
Just because it's a reality in American history doesn't mean that America is a terrible, terrible place in total. What it does mean is that it has flaws. Okay, and those flaws need to be corrected.
Dr. Wallace Ford is a professor of public administration at Medgar Evers College and studied under former Harvard Law School professor Derek Bell, one of the main architects of critical race theory.
Why people are upset, I think, in many instances, is that the truth about American history and race is being proposed to be taught. Okay, it's important to know that 10 of the first 12 presidents of the United States were slave owners. It's important to know that the Constitution of the United States literally embedded slavery into the document we call the Constitution of the United States. It's important to understand that segregation and racism have permeated throughout all American society and needs to be corrected.
Resolving the debate over critical race theory, along with the question of whether it's appropriate to increase students' exposure to the concept of systemic racism, will ultimately come down to reconciling personal perspectives.
We need to teach our kids the basics.
You don't want to get too in-depth about that stuff?
Not at this level. It's not appropriate.
The big question is, how do we bridge that gap?
Well, right now it's not bridgeable, because if you don't agree with certain people on anything, you're a racist, you're a sexist, you're this, you're that.
Jay Dow, Pix 11 News.